Welcome, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
So again, we're still in this chapter 14 of Genesis, discussing this campaign that these four kings fought against the five kings. Essentially, those five kings were the kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Tzmoim, and Zoar, or Bela, it was called before, and their successful campaign against these five kings. And so we just had read how the four kings had successfully conquered the five, and how they had taken captive and taken Lot along with them, because Lot and his family were living in that vicinity, and took him up by Damascus. So here we go. Verse 13. Vayavo hapalit, and the escapee came. And it's interesting, this use of the definite article, because the definite article indicates a known object, a known something. When we talk about the something, we are always referring to something that's already been mentioned and that we're aware of. That's the note, and that it's something specific that we're talking about. So the fact that it says the escapee, Vayaged Avraham Avri, and he told Abraham the Hebrew. It's interesting that here Abraham is referred to as the Ivri, the Hebrew, the one who crossed over. Vahu Shochin, this is Vahu and he, that is Abraham, or Abram, right? Still Abram, and he was dwelling Be'elonei Mamre, and amongst the terebinths of Mamre, the oak trees of Mamre. Elone could also mean the plains of Mamre. We're not absolutely certain as to how to translate that word. Okay, the way Onkelos translates it as plains, Meshre, right, of Mamre, Ha'emori, the Amorite. Interesting. Mamre is an Amorite. Ache Eshkol, Mamre is the brother of Eshkol, Va'ache Aner, and the brother of Aner. So these three people, Vehem Ba'alei Vrit Avram, and they were confederates, right? They had made an agreement, they'd made a covenant with Abram. So where there is some sense that certainly Eshkol and Mamre, and possibly Ashkur and Achre and Aner, the fact that they're called Baalei Brit, and we're aware that God had made this covenant with Abram, or he will make this covenant of the circumcision, whether or not they also, and that the Torah is foreshadowing the fact that they also become Confederates. But again, a little bit of a universalistic theme coming in here. So let's go back now. I'm going to go into the Torah T'mimah here, because he has a comment, and it's an interesting one, and it's somewhat, I would say, it's somewhat of a well-known comment out there, because the question is, when it talks about the escapee, who's it talking about? The one who escaped, right, from the captives that the four kings had captured. So who is this? Because it talks about the escapee. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, said Rabbi Yochanan, and just to emphasize, Rabbi Yochanan is a major player in the Talmudic era. I believe he's attributed with the creation of the Talmud Yerushalmi, but he is mentioned very, very much in the Bavli as well, in the Babylonian Talmud. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, said Rabbi Yochanan, Ze Og Melech HaBashan, where that this Palit was Og, king of Bashan, right, who is mentioned later on in the book of Numbers, right, as one of the people who tried to prevent the Israelites from entering the land of Canaan. And this is the same one, and he was back in the Torah. It mentions how he was this giant, he was this huge fellow, Shepalat Midor Hamabul. So when are we saying that he was an escapee, we're actually referring to the fact, because he's called about the escapee, that we're referring to the fact that he escaped from the generation of the flood. In other words, he lived at the same time as Noah and the flood, and he was able to escape the flood. And this is in Tractate Nida, page 61a. So this, of course, raises some other questions too, right? And in fact, Torah T'mimah is going to go right into that, right here. Lo nitbaer. It isn't clear ha'hechreach l'drasha zu. What is the need, right, to explain this? Why did Rabbi Yochanan feel a need to actually tell us who the escapee was? It just says the escapee in the Torah, and why and on what basis does he say that it's Og? How do we know that it's Og? Right? So how is this drasha supported at this particular point by this verse and other words in the Torah where they do mention Og specifically? V'yesh lomar, and one could say, one could answer, mishum de beparshat Dvarim. Why? Because in Parshat Dvarim, in Deuteronomy, where Og is mentioned again in Parshat Dvarim, Kativ ki rak Og melech Bashan nishar miyeta harifaim. It says, for only Og, king of Bashan, remained from the leftover of the Rephaim. So the Rephaim were this nation of giants. We're told that they were called giants. They were referred to as giants, the Rephaim, and only Og was the one who survived, right? And he was the only one who remained. So the question is, what did he remain? From what? Uva Bereshit Rabbah, Perek Lamed Aleph, and in Bereshit Rabbah, this is this major midrash on the Torah, and this, of course, on the book of Genesis, in chapter 31, Darshu, there they interpret Hapasuk, the verse, de Eov, that's found in Job, in the book of Job. Look at how we are going through a sort of an encyclopedic knowledge of the Bible, right? So there's this verse in Job that says, "Harifaim yecholalu mitachat mayim." The Rephaim tremble from underneath the water, right? Deka'e al dor hamabul. And there, that verse in Job is understood to refer to the generation of the flood, right, under the water, right? V'chein darshu b'Sanhedrin kufchet aleph, and likewise they interpret in the tractate Sanhedrin in the Babylonian Talmud, page 108a, hapasuk, another verse, right? De Rephaim bal yakumu, the Rephaim will not arise, and this is from Isaiah chapter 26. So all these references to Rephaim and how they come together, they all appear to be referring to the flood, right? Deka'e al dor hamabul. That again, this Rephaim that's mentioned in Isaiah, which says they will not arise, is a reference again to the generation of the flood. That is to say, he's just clarifying this. And there in Sanhedrin, they're referring to the Rephaim because this chapter talks about the world to come. In other words, something to do with life after death, whether it refers to the world of souls or whether it refers to resurrection, but at least the Rephaim are excluded from those people. Umikevan dichtiv ba'og, and because with reference to Og, it says shenishar. This is the one in Deuteronomy, right? That says nishar miyeta for Rephaim, because it says, however, Og was left over from the rest of the Rephaim. Lachen darshu, for this reason they interpret shenishar midor hamabul, that he himself was left over from the generation of the flood. In other words, that the Rephaim were basically destroyed in the flood, and only Og was the one who managed to survive the rest of the Rephaim, right? Uva haplit, the hey, and the fact he's now mentioning the fact that it says hapalit, right? It comes with a hey, which is the definite article in Hebrew, and because it says uva hapalit, it says the palit came. Klomar hayadua, that is to say, one who is already known, one that is known. And now he makes a really cool comment here. We had mentioned in our previous lesson the issue of gematrias and those kinds of those drushes that are called remez, right? Allusions. So he refers to Baal HaTurim. So there is a commentary on the Torah by Baal HaTurim. I believe we're talking about Jacob ben Asher. Okay, and his commentary is basically all his commentary is based on remez, right? So his commentary is filled with gematrias and acronyms and things like this. Parshat Noach, and in the Baal HaTurim in Parshat Noach, referring to the Parsha of Noach, the pasuk Vayishar af Noach, where there it says there only Noah, right, remained of the generation. So it sounds like it's saying that everyone else in the flood died, right? Katav ve'zeloshuno. He writes, the Baal HaTurim writes, and this is quoting him directly. Ach Noach. If you look at the words Ach Noach, right, only Noah, and you look at the gematria of it, in other words, Aleph is 1, Kaf is 20, so we got 21. Noach is 50, so that's 71. And Chet is 8, so we got 79. The gematria, if you look at the gematria of Ach Noach, guess what? You have Og. Og Ayin is 70, Vav is 6, Gimel is 3, so 79. V'nir'eh dera'ah l'ramez chen, and it would appear that it was appropriate, right, that he saw to make this allusion, kedei liyashev, in order to be able to answer, right, to be able to harmonize, essentially, or satisfy, echef shalomar bichlal, how can you say at all, shenishar ish lavad Noach, that you could say someone survived besides Noah, right? When the verse says only Noah, implying Noah and his family, survived the flood. How can you say anyone else did? And he's saying, Levad Noach uveito, and Noah and his household, midor hamabul, from the generation of the flood, acharei dichtiv meforash. After all, it says explicitly in the text, vayishar ach Noach, where it says only ach Noach survived. Lachen romez, and for this reason, there is this allusion, sheyesh lish'arato, right, that we have to leave over, right, him, remez b'lashon Torah, right, so that we have og left over in the words of the Torah itself. And this is a really wonderful, I think, illustrative gematria to show that the Torah goes well beyond the surface meaning, the pshat meaning of the Torah. And the fact that the Torah uses that expression, ach Noach, it could have said Vayishar Noach, but the fact is that here, Ach Noach, meaning only Noah, that's the literal interpretation, actually leaves room through the process of gematria to actually support the fact that Og survived the flood, where there are, in fact, other implications as to Og surviving in that chapter in Deuteronomy, where it says Og was the only one who survived amongst the Rephaim. So there is now some internal support, even on the pshat level, to support this very, very cool gematria that Baal HaTurim is able to come up with. Baal HaTurim himself bases his commentary on someone called the Rokeach. I'm not sure that's the name, the Rokeach. A Rokeach is somebody who's like a spice maker, and it's as if we're talking about remez as the spice of the Torah. In other words, it's not something you see, just like you could take fragrances, the fragrance of the Torah, because you don't see, you only experience fragrances. So that's one reason why the author of these particular interpretations was referred to himself as the Rokeach. So just I think this is a wonderful interpretation and Torah T'mimah that we had this today. Next. Okay, so going on back into the text itself. So the escapee comes, tells Abraham, etc., and we're talking about where Abraham, etc., was staying. Vayishma Avram, and Abram heard ki nishba achiv, that his brother had been taken captive. Vayarek et chanichav, and he armed. We're going to translate Vayarek, right, as the people he had trained. Chanicha, a chanich is somebody who's a trainee, right? So we're going to translate Vayarek, and that's going to be an interesting word that we're going to drush on, right? That he armed the people he trained, Yelidei Veto, the ones who were born in his household. Shmona Asar Ushlosh Meot, 318, Vayirdof Adan, and he pursued them to Dan, right, to Dan. I'm going to go a little bit more just for the verse. Vayechalek Alehem Laila, Hu v'abadav, and he split up over them. In other words, he split his troops, however we want to say it. He went with his troops. I will just anticipate a little bit that there are those who say actually all he took was Eliezer, and that's because the gematria of Eliezer, we'll see, maybe Torah T'mimah is going to refer to it, is actually 318. But at any rate, we can take it on the pshat level. At any rate, they split up. Laila hu v'avadav, that night, he and his servants, vayakem, and he smote them. Vayir defein ad chova, and he pursued them to the place called Chova, asher mismol l'Damasek, which is, I guess that would be small means left, which is left of Damascus. So in other words, on the west side of Damascus. That's how far he pursued this. And before we get into Torah T'mimah, just the whole idea that we just read about how these four kings had successfully campaigned against a whole bunch of different nations and how different peoples or tribes had successfully done that, had conquered these five kings, and here Abraham is able to pursue them and defeat them, which is, of course, the way of the implication being that Abram's amazing power, his strength. And I imagine we could go further than that and talk about the nature of Abraham and why he was able to do this, why he was able to accomplish this, and what the Torah is trying to tell us about the power of having a belief in God and being a servant to God, of having God be your Elohim. That is the notion of Elohim, that God, we are accepting God upon us as our Eloha, as being the one to whom we have to show loyalty and devotion to. So, but let's get back into this one. Vayarek et chanichav. So this Vayarek, this is the question. What do we mean by Yarek? Yeah, question, David?
Yeah, by the way, how old was Abraham at this point? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I would say that he was at least 99, somewhere
Yeah,
around there. I'm going to
that's,
guess.
that's
I'm trying to think. We know that he was 75 when he left, Ur Kasdim, right? He was 75. So I believe, I'm trying to think, he was 99 when God announces to him that Isaac was born, and this is happening before that. So, he was somewhere between 75 and 99.
okay. That I just asked because the whole idea of the battle, this concept and this age, it's very interesting. So
Yes, it
anyway,
is. Yes, it is.
just
Uh,
curious. Okay,
Right. So also, Abraham actually lives to the age of 175.
right. So anyway, so
Yeah.
it's quite a okay. All right. Anyway, I was just curious. I thought it was something like that, but I was just curious. Okay.
Right, right. So I'd say he was younger than 99, but still above 75.
Yeah.
I'm sure by quite a bit, by quite a
Yeah.
bit. But
Okay.
we'll see. He's got a bunch more things to go through. It's at the end of this parsha where he actually becomes Avraham, right?
Yep.
Where he becomes Avraham, and at this point the announcement. So I believe we still have to go through his Sarah giving him Hagar, etc., and the Ishmael has not been born yet. So we'd have to subtract 13 from 100. So that's going to give us 83, 87. So he's at least he's no older than 87. I'm
Okay.
just trying to do a process of figuring this out. So anyway, going on. Vayarek et chanichav. Right. So this, what do we mean? I translated it as armed. But there is this word, this root could be from yirik, okay, or rake, which means empty, or yarak, which means to encourage, right? To make courageous, from the root yarak. So Rav Amar Shehorikan Batorah. So the question is Laharik or Horikan. How do we want to translate that? It could mean he emptied them, and we're going to see that this particular drush takes into account these ideas here. Okay, but Yarak can refer to make courageous, right? In through the Torah. Ushmuel Amar Shehorikan Bazahav. And Shmuel, again, using this term Yarak, and exactly what the Talmud means by using this particular term, we're not sure. So it could mean Shehorikan Bazahav, that he made them strong through gold, So we're going to take a look at Torah T'mimah on this right here. Okay. Kavanat, right? The intention of Rav, right? Rav, shehorikan min haTorah. So Torah T'mimah, I just translated from Yarak, right? But he is translating this at this, here Torah T'mimah is suggesting that it means to empty, right? In other words, rake, that he emptied them in haTorah. Milashon v'habor rake, from the expression, there's a verse later on when we're talking about the story of the brothers throwing Joseph into the pit, and it says there that the pit was rake, meaning the pit was empty. Mipnei, so how do we understand that he emptied them of Torah? Mipnei shitarda. Sorry, mipnei hatirda, on account of being preoccupied. In other words, they were so preoccupied, shetirdam b'milchama, that he made them preoccupied by this battle, right? So meaning, okay, that they couldn't study Torah because they were preoccupied with the battle. Ukimavora, bidrasha haba'ar. And in the next drasha, because there's another a drasha on Vayarek that is going to suggest that Abraham, in fact, prevented these people from studying Torah. All right? The Gam Yesh sheyesh lefarech, he says, but one can also interpret it shehurikan b'Torah. So now he's showing you that there's this other interpretation which takes the word horikan and uses it as the verb from the root yarak. Shehorikan b'Torah shezirzan b'divrei, right? Torah, that he encouraged them with the words of Torah. So you can understand this particular drush in two ways, that he actually encouraged them in Torah, sheyit asku behatzalat nefashot, that they should occupy themselves in the rescuing of souls. We know that helping someone survive, right? That making a life, saving a life is worth everything, right? That we know that saving a life is more important than all the other mitzvahs. There are three exceptions, but essentially, in order to save a life, you can abrogate other laws of the Torah in order to save a life. And so that he encouraged them in going after and pursuing these people to save Lot. That's what's meant here. The Da'at Shmuel, and we've got Shmuel, remember, who said that he horikam zahav, and the opinion of Shmuel is shehir ba lahem zahav mishalo, that he actually gave them a lot of money of his own. He paid them a lot of gold, kedei shelo yitnu einehem b'mamon b'milchama, so that they wouldn't. Literally, it means give their eyes in the booty, in the money that is in the battle. In other words, the idea of the battle and being able to take spoil, so they would be sufficiently wealthy. They wouldn't care about taking any spoil. Vayit'asku barak b'hatzalat nefashot, and that they would only occupy themselves in the saving and the rescuing of souls. So it's interesting, this particular drush, that we have these two particular ways of understanding of the drush itself, of Vayarek, of the Horikam, how we understand this. So next time we meet, we will take a look at the very next comment, which is also, Vayarek, on this term Vayarek. I'm just going to mark here the place in the Torah T'mimah where we have, but we're actually going to go that the comment above the line is right here. So I'm going to put in another little arrow here to mark where we are in the Torah T'mimah above the line here. So that's going to be right over here. So, are there any comments? Anybody want to make a comment before we stop the recording? Any comments for the record?
Oh,
Harlan?
this giant that
Yes.
was that
Og?
the giant that David was
No,
asleep
that's
with?
much later on. Much later on.
But it was part of the family of
No. Goliath was a Philistine.
Oh,
Philistines appear to have come from the island of Crete. It's so interesting that not only the Israelites entered the land of Canaan, all right,
yeah,
but
yeah.
also the Philistines apparently had come across the sea from Crete and taken that land in that area where like Gaza is a
Gaza?
Philistine city, and those particular places.
Yeah,
Ashdod,
was it Gaza? They had the land of
Philistine.
Gaza, right?
Yes.
Yeah, the Philistines were.
Gaza was a Philistine city, and especially the Philistines were a problem later on. During
Oh,
the time of King Saul, we read about King Saul and Samuel at that period of the relatively early occupation of the land of Canaan by the Israelites. I don't believe Joshua, who's the one who goes in and conquers the land to begin with, is troubled by the Philistines. It's only after that period of time that the Philistines start to challenge the Israelites in the land of Canaan. But yeah,
wow.
Og is a different person altogether.
Oh,
That was under the days of Moses, where they're about to enter the land, and they lived on the outskirts of the land, on the border of the land of Canaan. And we talk about Sichon, King Sichon, and Og, that tried to prevent the Israelites from entering the land of Canaan.
oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.